In the shadowed highlands of Crestview, Vermont, where the pines stood as ancient sentinels and the mountain air carried the weight of forgotten oaths, the dark carriage had no rightful place upon Pinecrest Road. Every soul in that quiet hamlet knew it the instant the wheels met the gravel. The conveyance was too pristine, too hushed, too certain of its path, amid the weathered wooden houses and the gnarled pines. Curtains stirred behind old windows. A retired craftsman paused in his labor upon the fence. Even the crows upon the rusted wire ceased their clamor. Lord Benedict Cross, the vampire sovereign who had chosen exile among mortals, stood framed in the doorway of his stone cottage. A faded gray cloth held in his hands, his gaze fixed upon the carriage as it halted precisely before his wooden gate. Behind him, his daughter Iris. A child of but 8 summers pressed her cheek to his coat and peered around his form, her small fingers clutching the fabric with quiet urgency. The lady who descended from the carriage wore a simple cream blazer. She bore neither briefcase nor documents, nor visible quill. She walked the cracked stone path with a steady stride born of profound resolve rather than pride. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps and lifted her eyes to him. Her gaze took in his stark white hair and the noble pallor of his ancient lineage, yet she did not blink nor turn away. "My name is Diana Brooks," she said, her voice clear and unwavering in the cold air. "My father has departed this world, but I have come to settle the debt he left behind." The entire hillside seemed to hold its breath. Benedict did not move a single muscle. He knew that family name all too well. For 6 long years, he had labored to bury it in the deepest recesses of his mind. Lord Benedict Cross was older than his appearance suggested, bearing the quiet majesty of a vampire king who had embraced exile among humans. He carried the countenance of a man in his 42nd year, with sharp features and a face that had once greeted the world with ease. Years past, he had smiled upon neighbors and spent long hours instructing young stoneworkers in the principles of structural balance upon regional works. That gentle nature remained concealed beneath a careful veil of stillness that had settled over him 6 years before. It was a guard forged from the harsh lesson that trust was a luxury he could no longer bestow upon any who asked. He dwelt with Iris in this narrow 2-story stone house upon the damp edge of Crestview, where the local shops still employed old iron grates upon the windows, and the school carriages often faltered upon the icy morning roads. The cottage was kept in perfect order. Benedict ensured it so each day. The wooden floors were scrubbed, the iron stove polished, and Iris's charcoal sketches of forest creatures were affixed in neat rows along the hallway. These were small tokens of dignity, the things a proud man preserves when greater achievements have been stripped from him by falsehood. 6 years earlier, Benedict had served as chief architectural supervisor upon the Grand Mountain Aqueduct, the largest public stone contract the realm had witnessed in half a century. The project was funded and constructed by Brooks Holdings, a great development house founded by Lord Thomas Brooks. It was precisely the sort of historic restoration for which Benedict had spent decades preparing. He was precise, deeply learned, and beloved by his working crews. A bright path lay before him. Then he discovered the structural failing. During a routine midnight inspection of the primary stone arches, Benedict found deep diagonal fractures in 3 massive load-bearing sections. The workers had poured a cheap concrete core that did not match the historic stone specifications. He documented every crack, took dozens of photographs, filed a formal report to the project manager, and sent a copy to the Regional Safety Council. He demanded an immediate halt to all construction until an independent team could examine the stone. His warnings went unheeded. 2 weeks later, a major section of the western stone span collapsed during an evening shift change. 4 mortal workers suffered severe injuries. The structural damage delayed the project by 8 months and cost the house millions. When the state investigation concluded, the final report presented an entirely different reality. Benedict's original warning reports had vanished from the main files. In their place stood a narrative claiming that the supervisor, Benedict Cross, had neglected his duties and failed to notice the obvious signs any professional should have seen. The report named him as the sole person responsible for the disaster. The House terminated his contract the following Monday morning. Within 6 months, his name was blacklisted across every major building network in New England. No mortal firm would engage him, and his specialized design licenses were suspended for an indefinite review that never occurred. The timing shattered his life in ways that extended far beyond his work. His mortal wife, Martha, was battling a grave blood illness when he lost his position and their medical protection. Benedict sold his family heirlooms. He took roofing work labored night shifts, stacking heavy timber at a local mill, and accepted any task that paid in coin. He borrowed from old friends until they had nothing left to give. He did everything a father could do, yet it was not enough. Martha passed 14 months after his dismissal in a small hospital chamber that smelled of sharp soap. Benedict held her cold hand while Iris slept in a wooden chair in the corner, too young to grasp the loss, yet old enough to remember the quiet tears. After that night, Benedict ceased expecting anything from the mortal world save the quiet chance to raise his daughter safely in the shadows. That was the man who stood upon the porch when Diana Brooks arrived. Diana Brooks was 34 years of age and had recently inherited a vast commercial empire she had never desired, along with a dark truth she had never expected to uncover. Lord Thomas Brooks had passed from a sudden failure of the heart 8 weeks prior, leaving his desk exactly as it stood. Powerful men often departed the world in such fashion as though their physical forms simply refused to bear the weight of their secrets any longer. He left behind a development house valued at nearly $2 billion, a high leather chair in a glass tower, and a locked iron safe concealed behind a wooden panel in his private study. Diana discovered the safe only when the estate lawyers arrived to inventory the property. Within that safe, beneath old land deeds and a framed image of Thomas shaking hands with the governor, lay a thick manila folder bound by a faded rubber band. It was labeled, in her father's sharp hand, with a single name: Grand Mountain. Diana sat upon the hard floor of her father's empty office and read every page in one sitting, still clad in the black wool dress from the funeral. By the time she turned the final page, night had deepened, the house staff had retired, and the great building stood in darkness around her. The folder contained Benedict Cross's original warning report, the very document never shown to the public investigators. It held an independent stone assessment ordered by a city inspector 2 weeks before the disaster, which fully supported Benedict's concerns and called for an immediate cessation of work. Most damning of all, it contained a short note written by Thomas Brooks to the project manager 3 days before the arch collapsed. The note read, "Keep the schedule. Change the safety logs later if we must. I will handle the state regulators." Those 3 short sentences were penned in her father's distinctive script and signed clearly with his personal mark. Diana spent the following 2 weeks searching for any alternate explanation that did not brand her father a criminal. She spoke to no one of the papers. She engaged a private handwriting scholar to confirm the note's authenticity, cross-referenced the project, dates pulled old town records, and requested copies of the public trial transcripts under her new title as chief executive. Every document confirmed the same truth. Benedict Cross had performed his duties perfectly. He had found the danger, reported it through proper channels, and been systematically ruined by the House to protect their profits and public name. Thomas Brooks had known everything, and he had chosen to destroy an innocent man. Thus, Diana drove her carriage to Pinecrest Road. She came without corporate lawyers, for lawyers would have turned truth into a financial bargain, and she refused to bargain upon this matter. She came without a pre-written settlement offer, for placing a specific sum upon paper felt an insult to the life this man had lost. She arrived in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, for she had not slept a full hour since finding that iron safe and waiting any longer felt as though she participated in her father's crime. She had rehearsed her words during the long drive, yet standing now at the foot of the steps, looking up at a white-haired man who carried a universe of quiet pain in his shoulders, she realized none of her practiced sentences sufficed. So she spoke the only raw truth she possessed. "My father has departed this world, but I have come to pay his debt." Benedict looked down at her for a long moment. His noble face showed neither anger nor softened into kindness. It was the countenance of one who had learned to watch the world carefully before making a single move. "What debt?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Benedict did not invite the lady inside his home. He stepped down one wooden stair and stood at the top of the porch close enough for Diana to see the deep weariness around his eyes, the sort that years of sleep could never truly mend. Iris remained in the open doorway behind him, watching Diana with the clear, quiet curiosity of a child who had lived apart from the world for too long. Diana spoke calmly of the hidden safe, the thick folder, and the note written in her father's hand. She spoke without dramatic words or self-pity, the manner of one who knows the facts will cause pain no matter how gently spoken. She explained that his original safety report had been preserved, not destroyed. It had been saved deliberately, perhaps from guilt or as a form of protection, and she admitted she would likely never know her father's true reason. Benedict listened without sound or interruption. His jaw tightened briefly when she read the words of the note, but otherwise he remained perfectly still against the porch post. When she finished speaking, the wind moved through the pines for a long moment before he spoke. "Why do you tell me this now?" he asked quietly. "Because it is the truth," Diana replied, looking up at him, "and because you have a right to hold that truth." Benedict released a short, dry breath. "That is not a true answer," he said. "Many things are true in this world. Those with your family resources do not drive out to broken mountain roads to distribute truths from pure kindness. What do you truly desire from me?" It was a fair question, and Diana did not look away from his gaze. "I wish to set the record right," she answered. "I wish to reopen the official case, have the state investigation corrected, and clear your name through the public courts. I wish the documents my father hid to become a permanent part of the legal record." "And what does Brooks Holdings gain from doing that?" Benedict asked. "Absolutely nothing," she replied. "The house will suffer greatly. The board of directors will oppose me at every step. Our stock value will fall the moment this becomes public knowledge. I understand the cost." Benedict studied her face, his pale eyes catching the afternoon light. "Then why do it?" Diana held his gaze firmly. "Because my father built our family wealth upon what he stole from you. That means every coin I inherited rests upon that lie. I am simply not willing to live my life atop that foundation." The quiet mountain street remained still around them. Down the road, an old carriage engine coughed and faded. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice. Benedict looked at her for a long time, then past her shoulder at the fine carriage parked by his fence, its dark paint contrasting sharply with the dry grass of Pinecrest Road. He looked back at Diana. "I have a daughter," he said, indicating the little girl behind him. "She is 8 years of age. She does not know the dark details of what happened 6 years ago. She knows only that her mother is gone, and that our lives became very hard. That is all I have ever permitted her to know of our past." He paused for a breath. "If I allow you to open this legal case again, her name will be dragged into the light with mine. The public chroniclers will find her. They always find a way." "I know that risk," Diana said softly. "I will not pretend it is safe for her." "Then you understand why I cannot simply say yes to your request," Benedict said. "I understand completely," she answered. They stood in the cold air without speaking. Diana did not press him for an immediate answer, having promised herself she would let him choose his own time. It was little Iris who finally broke the long silence. She slipped past her father's arm, disappeared back into the darkness of the stone house, and returned 30 seconds later carrying a clean glass of cold spring water. She held it out toward Diana, with both small hands, her expression entirely serious. Diana reached out and took the glass from her. "Thank you, Iris," she said. The girl gave a small, solemn nod and immediately moved back behind her father's coat. Benedict watched his daughter, and something in his expression changed slightly. It was not full trust, but it was no longer the hard wall of final rejection. "Sit upon the bottom step," he told Diana. "Do not enter my house, but you may speak." The long conversations took place upon those weathered wooden steps over the course of the following week. Diana returned to the mountain cottage 3 times. She always arrived alone, always in the late afternoon when the sun dipped below the pines, and she never brought corporate papers or legal agreements. She sat quietly upon the lowest stone step near the gravel path. Benedict sat upon the top step, his back resting against the sturdy porch beam. Iris brought her schoolwork out to the porch swing between them, occasionally asking questions remarkably sharp for a child of 8 years. Benedict answered each with the careful honesty of a father who believed his daughter deserved truth in small, manageable pieces. The small hamlet watched them closely. Marcus, an older man who had owned the local valley shop for 23 years, spoke his mind on the second afternoon of her visits. He stopped Benedict near the front counter, while Iris examined small jars of honey upon the lower shelves. He spoke in a low voice, yet he did not hide his concern. "I have seen this happen before," Marcus said, placing Benedict's bread into a paper bag with slow, deliberate movements. "A different fine carriage, a different elegant suit, but the exact same outcome. These wealthy city folk come to the mountains with grand apologies, and they leave your house with your signature upon a legal release. 2 years later, the town land is bought up, and the locals are forced to depart." "She has not asked me to sign a single paper," Benedict replied. "Not yet," Marcus said, sliding the bag across the counter. "They never ask for the thing they truly want until they have made you believe they are doing you a wonderful favor." Benedict did not argue with the old shopkeeper. He had shared those exact thoughts himself for many years. What made Diana difficult to dismiss was not her polite manner, for politeness was easy to perform for an afternoon. It was the precise details she brought with her. She knew the exact date of his first warning letter. She knew the name of the valley inspector who had tried to help him before the collapse. She knew private facts that had never entered any public chronicle details that could exist only inside a stolen house file. That specific knowledge did not prove her heart entirely pure, but it proved the thick folder was real, and that folder was the only thing that could change his world. Meanwhile, within the glass offices of Brooks Holdings down in the city, the situation grew dangerous for Diana. Harrison Croft had served as the corporation's chief legal director for 19 years. He was 61 years of age, carried himself with extreme precision, and possessed no personal sentiment regarding anything that threatened the house's financial survival. Diana had told no soul at the office of her journeys to Crestview, yet Harrison kept his own eyes upon the house assets. A carriage registered to Diana's private name had been spotted twice near the mountain roads by a regional delivery driver who mentioned it to the wrong secretary. That single detail sufficed for Harrison. He called an immediate private meeting and stated his position without polite introduction. "The Grand Mountain case is finished and buried," he said, sitting across from Diana in the wide conference chamber upon the 34th floor. "It is legally settled, signed by the state regulators, and completely closed. If you attempt to open it now, you are not correcting an old mistake. You are creating a massive financial liability that this house cannot survive." The original settlement was built upon completely false documents, Diana said, her voice rising slightly. "That is a serious charge," Harrison replied coldly. "It is a charge you cannot make without destroying your own family name, endangering our board of directors, and triggering an investor panic that will cost this house hundreds of millions in market value within 3 days. I am fully aware of the financial danger, Diana said. Then you must understand that the board of directors will vote to remove you from your position before they allow you to speak to a judge. Harrison said, looking directly at her. Are you speaking to me as our legal advisor, Harrison, or are you delivering a threat from the board? She asked. I am doing both, he answered, rising from the long table. I am doing you the personal kindness of ensuring you understand exactly what manner of war you are beginning. After he walked out, Diana sat entirely alone in the great chamber for hours, watching the cold rain strike the glass window. Somewhere out in the hills, Benedict Cross was preparing a simple supper for his daughter in a stone cottage that remained clean despite everything the world had thrown at it. She picked up her small telephone and sent a short message. I will be at your house tomorrow afternoon at the same hour. Upon her 4th visit to the mountain porch, Benedict finally told her everything. He did not speak because he had suddenly decided to trust her completely, but because 6 years of carrying a heavy secret alone had worn down his spirit. There was something about speaking the truth directly to the person whose family name sat upon the building that felt like returning a heavy stone to its rightful owner. He described the cold morning he first discovered the cracks in the lower arches. He had been conducting his standard walking inspection early in the morning before the mortal crews arrived at the site, a habit he had kept for decades. The fractures were tiny diagonal lines in the lower base of 3 connected stone pillars, lines that an ordinary mortal eye might have passed over as simple weathering. Benedict had seen that exact stress pattern upon an old bridge project in Europe 50 years before. He knew precisely what the stone was doing under the weight. He returned to the construction trailer and wrote out the report that very hour, filling 4 pages and attaching detailed photographs of the stone. He entered it into the house's digital tracking system and sent a physical copy to the regional safety office by registered post. He kept one paper copy for himself at his home because he had learned long ago that important documents had a way of vanishing when they became inconvenient for wealthy builders. Then he waited for the house to reply. The project manager, a harsh man named Brett, called him into the main office 2 days later and told him the pillars had been reviewed by internal engineers and were found to be completely safe. No stop work order would be given, and the schedule would continue as planned. Benedict argued against the decision, demanding to see the internal reports so he could compare them with his own measurements. Brett told him the engineering files were private house property. Benedict tried to call the regional director, but his calls were never returned. 2 weeks later, the stone gave way. When the state investigation began, Benedict told Diana, his voice dropping to a low whisper. I went to my desk to retrieve my personal copy of the safety report. He stopped and drew a deep breath. It was completely gone from my house. Someone had entered my home while I was away. Nothing else was stolen from the rooms, only the specific folder where I kept my project files. Diana sat perfectly still upon the lower step, her hands pressed together. I told the state investigators that I had filed the proper warnings, Benedict continued. They checked the digital system and told me there was no record of any report from me. The registered post receipt I held showed the document had been delivered, but the safety board claimed they had no record of receiving any package from my address. My home copy was gone, and I had no physical proof left. He looked down at his hands. Without that paper, I was merely a bitter supervisor claiming he had warned others while the corporation had 20 lawyers in expensive suits. I had nothing but my word. He told her of the long months of being blacklisted, the loss of his building license, and the way offers would suddenly appear and then vanish the moment an employer checked his past record. He spoke briefly of Martha not using many words because some losses were still too sharp to shape into sentences, but he said enough. He said enough for Diana to understand that her father's lie had taken more than his career. It had taken his family's peace. When he finished his tale, the mountain sky was turning to dark blue evening. Iris had fallen fast asleep upon the wooden porch swing behind them, her reading book still open across her small lap. Diana did not offer polite words of sorrow, knowing by now that he did not want her pity. What he had given her upon that porch was not a plea for comfort. It was a formal testimony. "The note I found in my father's iron safe," she said carefully, "was written exactly 3 days before the arch fell. He instructed the manager to keep the men working and alter the logs after the accident." She paused, looking at his white hair. "He knew your name, Benedict. He had your original report upon his desk. He read your words, and he chose to bury them." Benedict gave a single slow nod. He had suspected that truth for 6 long years, but hearing it confirmed aloud brought no sudden feeling of relief. It simply made the shape of his past clear. Sometimes clarity was the only thing an exiled king could ask for. "What happens next?" he asked. Diana looked into his eyes. "That depends entirely upon what you wish to do," she said. "This is your life and your story. I will take no action without your permission." 3 days after that long conversation, a white envelope arrived in Benedict's mailbox. It bore the return address of a private debt collection firm called Valley Recovery Partners. The short letter informed him that an outstanding legal cost of $14,000 from the old Grand Mountain investigation had been assigned to their office for immediate collection. The document stated that full payment was due within 30 days, and failure to pay would result in a legal lien being placed directly upon his stone cottage. Benedict read the lines twice while sitting at his kitchen table as Iris ate her morning oats. Then he folded the paper neatly and placed it into his coat pocket. He did not mention the letter to his daughter. She was only 8 years of age, and she did not need to know that their small home was being used as a lever by powerful mortals. He walked out to the quiet backyard and called Diana upon her telephone. She answered upon the very first ring. When he read her the words of the collection notice, a long silence fell over the line, telling him immediately that she had no part in it, and that she understood exactly who had sent it. "That is not a real debt," Diana said, her voice shaking with anger. "No legal fees were ever charged to you during that trial. I have read every single financial record from those court proceedings. I know it is a false charge," Benedict said calmly. "That is not what concerns me. I can have my personal lawyer dissolve that notice within 24 hours, Diana said. "No," Benedict said, his voice dropping with a sudden royal weight that made the line go quiet. He softened his tone slightly. "No, I do not want you paying off threats made against my home by your house's executives. That is not how we will do this, Diana. If you pay them to leave me alone, then every time I look at these stone walls, I will know my home was saved by Brooks' family coin. I cannot live in a house bought by that lie, and I certainly cannot let Iris grow up in it." Diana remained quiet for a long moment. "I understand," she said finally. "I will not touch the notice." But that white letter changed something between them upon the mountain. It was not about the $14,000. It was about the realization that the corporate board was willing to use a child's home as a weapon. Benedict understood now that reopening the old case would bring a real storm down upon his quiet life. He began to step back from Diana. He did not cancel her next visit to the porch, but he was far more distant during their hours together. He answered her questions with short formal responses and volunteered no details about his thoughts. Diana noticed the change immediately, but she did not press him to speak. She waited quietly upon her lower step. Finally, he spoke his mind clearly. "You can walk away from this fight, Diana. It might not be easy for your conscience, but you have the means to do it. You are young, you are intelligent, and you have endless resources. If Brooks Holdings falls apart, you can simply build a new life under a different name in another city. Those with your wealth always have a next chapter available to them." "That is true," she admitted softly. "I do not have a next chapter," Benedict said, looking out at the pines. "I have this single stone house, and I have Iris. If we challenge the board, and we lose, if they hide the papers again, and the judges side with the house, I lose this cottage. I lose the small bit of respect I have managed to build here, and my daughter grows up watching her father broken a second time by the exact same family. He looked down at her. I need you to realize that before we take another step. This is not an equal risk. What you are risking and what I am risking are completely different things. Diana held his gaze and did not offer a promise she could not guarantee. I know, she said. I know they are not the same. They sat with that heavy truth between them until Benedict stood, told her he needed time to think alone, and went inside his house. Diana drove back down the mountain road in the deep dark, and for the first time since opening her father's iron safe, she wondered if she had any right to ask this man for his help at all. 2 days later, Benedict called Diana and asked her to come up to Pinecrest Road one final time. She arrived at the usual late hour. The afternoon sky was gray and flat, making the small mountain houses look old and small against the dark trees. Iris was nowhere to be seen upon the porch. For the first time since Diana had started driving up the mountain, the wooden porch swing was completely empty. No books were scattered upon the seat, and no glass of cold water appeared from small hands. There was only Benedict standing at the top of the stone steps, with his arms crossed over his chest, his posture completely rigid. He did not offer to sit down, and Diana remained standing at the gate. I have spent 2 days thinking upon your proposal, he said, and I cannot do it. Diana waited for him to finish. It is not that I doubt your honesty, he continued, his voice low. I believe the thick folder is real. I believe the handwritten note is real. And I believe you truly wish to correct your father's wrong. He stopped for a moment. But wanting to change the past and having the power to do it are two entirely different things in the mortal world. The cost of trying and failing will fall entirely upon my daughter, and me, not upon you. I understand that, Diana said. I do not think you can feel it the way I feel it. He said, his tone firm but not cruel. You understand it in your mind. You have weighed the risks, included them in your corporate charts, and planned for them. But you have never lived the version of life where everything is taken from you, and there is absolutely nothing left to hold. I have lived that life, and I will not force Iris to go through it again. Diana did not try to argue with his words. She had promised herself she would never push him toward a choice he did not make with a free heart, and she intended to keep that promise now, even when keeping it felt like watching their quiet connection slip away into the trees. I respect your decision, she said softly. You are a good person, Benedict added, looking down at her. I want you to know that. What you are attempting to do comes from a pure place. But the road to where my father and I ended up was also built by people who believed they were doing what was necessary for their families. He let the words settle in the cold air. I simply cannot afford to trust another good intention that might break under pressure. Diana gave a small nod. There were no words left that could fix the past, so she turned and walked back to her carriage. She sat behind the steering wheel for a long time, without turning the key in the engine. Through the glass, the small stone house looked exactly as it always had worn, quiet and completely indifferent to the struggles of the people inside it. She had come to the mountains believing that doing the right thing was a form of shield, that presenting the raw truth would be enough to win the day. Benedict had just explained to her with more patience than she had earned why that belief was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. She drove back to her empty apartment in the city and sat at her kitchen table with her father's thick folder open before her. The short note sat atop the pile, 3 lines of ink that had cost a man his entire life. If she placed the folder back inside the iron safe, locked the panel, and ran the house the way the board expected, she would be taking the exact same path her father took. She would be moving in his direction. She sat in the quiet room for 3 hours until her telephone gave a short buzz upon the wooden table. It was a message from Benedict containing 4 short words. Do not leave yet, please. Diana stared at the screen, reading the words 3 times before she grabbed her keys and drove back toward the mountains. Benedict was sitting upon the wooden steps when her carriage pulled up to the gate. It was past 9 o'clock in the evening, and the mountain road had gone completely dark and still. Everyone had retired behind their wooden doors to face their own struggles. A single old street lamp cast a pale yellow circle upon the gravel path. Benedict held a warm mug of tea in both his hands, looking down at the dirt, when Diana walked up the walkway. She sat down upon the lowest step without a word, and he did not move away. "My daughter asked me a question tonight while I was putting her to sleep," he said, after a few minutes of silence. "She looked up at me and asked why I never speak of the stone aqueduct. She told me she heard Marcus mention the disaster to his wife at the shop last week, and she knew the story was about her father. She said she had been waiting for me to bring it up when I was ready." He stopped and looked out at the dark trees. "She is only 8 years of age, and she has been spending her days protecting her father from a conversation she thought would hurt me." Diana remained quiet, listening to his breath. "I have spent 6 years making every single choice based upon the idea of protecting her from the world," Benedict said. "And it turns out she has been doing the exact same thing for me." He turned his head to look at her. "I do not want my daughter to grow up believing that is what love requires of a person, that you must protect the people you care about by staying entirely silent about the things that broke you." He set his mug down upon the wood beside him. "Show me everything you found in that office," he said. "All of it. Whatever else is inside that folder that you have not described to me yet." Diana reached into her bag and pulled out a large paper envelope, placing a small silver computer drive and 2 printed sheets upon the step between them. The first sheet was the private report ordered by the Valley Inspector, 4 pages, confirming the deep fractures Benedict had found and calling for an immediate halt to all work, dated exactly 14 days before the accident. It had never been seen by the public court. Benedict read the lines slowly, his fingers steady in the dim light. The second sheet was a chain of private corporate messages between Thomas Brooks and Harrison Croft, written during the week after the collapse, discussing exactly how to control the state investigation and which regional officials could be trusted to keep the files hidden. Benedict read that paper twice, his jaw tightening into a hard line, but he did not speak a word. Then Diana handed him a small speaker and connected the silver drive. "There is a recording here," she said in a low voice. "My father kept records of his private telephone calls. I do not know if he did it out of habit or for protection against his partners. But this file was in the safe." She pressed the button, and Thomas Brooks's deep voice filled the dark porch, sounding clear and cold. He was speaking directly to Brett, the manager, 4 days before the stone fell. Thomas told the manager to keep the men upon the arches and ignore the complaints. He stated that the safety report had been handled by their own people, and the stone was fine. When Brett mentioned that the supervisor had sent his findings to the State Safety Council, Thomas laughed softly. "That has already been taken care of," Thomas said upon the recording. "If anything breaks upon the site, we will blame it upon an equipment failure. The supervisor's report does not exist in our system, so nobody can use it against us. Make sure Harrison knows the dates for the filing." The recording stopped, and the hillside went completely silent again. Benedict sat perfectly still for several minutes, his white hair bright under the lamp. He did not yell or show tears. He looked down at the small speaker upon the wood, then at his own hands. "He read my report." Benedict said, his voice a whisper. "He knew exactly what the stone was doing, and he buried my words anyway." "Yes," Diana said. "And 4 days later, 4 men were crushed by the stone." "Yes," she replied. Benedict looked out at the dark road for a long time before he spoke again. "What do we do with these papers now?" he asked. "Whatever you choose to do," Diana answered, looking directly into his eyes. "I meant those words on the first day, and I mean them tonight." Benedict took 3 full days to make his decision, during which he sent not a single message to Diana. He performed his daily routines, collected Iris from her mountain school, cooked their simple meals, helped her with her spelling work, and sat alone upon the porch with the sound of Thomas Brooks's voice turning over in his mind until he knew exactly what he was willing to risk. On the 3rd morning, he called Diana and spoke 4 simple words. "Let us do it." They agreed to hold a public press conference rather than issuing a standard corporate statement through the house's public relations department. They did not want a legal filing that would sit hidden in a courthouse basement for months. They wanted a direct public presentation of the evidence where every chronicler could see the truths clearly. Diana would speak as an individual citizen, not as the head of Brooks Holdings. She engaged a private media lawyer to guide them through the meeting, but she made it clear that the words spoken would be her own, free of corporate language. The morning of the press conference, Harrison Croft attempted to call Diana 4 times upon her telephone, and she allowed each call to go to her voicemail without answering. The House's board of directors sent a formal letter to her chamber demanding she delay the meeting, to which she replied with a single sentence, "The time for waiting has passed." The meeting was held in a plain conference chamber at an old hotel in the city, a neutral space with no house logos or banners upon the walls. 14 regional journalists attended the gathering, and 3 local television stations set up their cameras at the back of the room. Benedict arrived quietly with Iris and took a seat in the very last row against the wall close to the exit door. Diana walked to the front of the room without any written notes in her hands. She spoke for 22 minutes to the cameras. She described the day she opened the hidden iron safe, the thick manila folder, and the handwritten note from her father. She explained how she had verified the writing with private experts and detailed the messages between Thomas Brooks and Harrison Croft. She played the audio file through the room's speakers, and the entire space went perfectly still when her father's voice stated that the supervisor's report did not exist in the system. She then placed 3 physical items upon the table as evidence: Benedict's original 4-page report, the independent inspector's assessment, and the silver computer drive. She stated clearly, without any complex legal terms, that Benedict Cross had found the structural failure at Grand Mountain, had reported it correctly through every channel, and had been deliberately framed by the corporation to save their coin and name. She stated that her father had chosen to hide the truth with full knowledge of the danger. She did not offer a corporate apology on behalf of the firm, nor did she use soft words like oversight or mistake. "My father made a deliberate choice." She told the cameras, her voice steady. It was a criminal choice, made with full awareness of what it would do to an innocent man and his family. "I am standing here today because that choice must be called what it truly was." When she finished speaking, a journalist in the second row turned around and asked if Benedict Cross wished to say anything to the public. Benedict stood up from his seat in the back. He walked down the center aisle slowly, while Iris watched him from her chair, her small hands folded quietly in her lap. He stood beside Diana at the front, looking out at the bright camera lights, and the recording devices pointed at his face. For the first time in 6 years, he felt a strange sense of solid ground beneath his feet. He looked at the journalists. "I performed my duties correctly," Benedict said, his voice filling the room without effort. "I found the danger, I wrote the details down, and I reported it to the people in charge. What happened after that night was not my failure as an architect. I spent 6 long years carrying a reputation that did not belong to my name. Today, I only want the public record to show what actually happened upon that mountain." He paused for a moment, looking toward the back row. "I am not standing here asking for your sympathy. I am here because my 8-year-old daughter is sitting in the back of this room, and I want her to see that the truth is always worth speaking aloud, no matter what it costs you to say it." He turned and walked back to his seat. Iris looked up at his face when he sat down beside her. She did not say a word, but she reached across the space and placed her small hand over his, leaving it there, while the journalists began to shout their questions. At the small grocery shop up on Pinecrest Road, Marcus stood beneath the little television set mounted over his wooden counter, watching the live news feed from the city hall. When Benedict finished speaking his final words and walked away from the microphone, Marcus reached up and turned the black plastic dial to make the volume as loud as it could go, ensuring every customer in the aisles could hear the broadcast. He did not say a single word to the people standing by the registers. He did not explain the history or try to justify his actions. He simply made sure that everyone in the valley could hear the white-haired man they had doubted stand up in the light and clear his name. The reaction from the city was not immediate, and it was certainly not clean. Brooks Holdings issued a short paper statement within 2 hours of the meeting claiming the evidence had been selected unfairly and the audio recording had not been verified by a court. Harrison Croft appeared upon an evening business program that same night, using the word context 17 times during an 8-minute interview with the host. The House Board voted unanimously to place Diana on official leave while they investigated her actions, but the physical documents were already available to the public. The audio file had been downloaded thousands of times and verified as authentic by 3 independent sound laboratories within 48 hours of the broadcast. 2 former construction workers contacted the local newspapers to share their own memories of the hidden cracks in the stone arches. A regional news writer managed to track down the original registered post receipt, proving Benedict's report had arrived at the safety office, along with an internal note telling the clerks to mark the file as lost. The story quickly spread beyond the small mountain hamlets. Within 1 week, a state oversight council announced a full investigation into the Grand Mountain Project and 3 other building contracts completed by Brooks Holdings during that same period. Harrison Croft hired a private criminal defense lawyer, and 2 longtime board members quietly resigned their positions before the weekend arrived. Benedict's professional records were formally corrected by the State Building Authority 6 weeks after the press conference took place. His architect licenses were returned to him, along with a formal letter from the governor, acknowledging that his original suspension had been based entirely upon false documents. The collection notice from Valley Recovery Partners was canceled by a judge, and the threatened lien upon his stone cottage was permanently erased without a single coin being paid. Diana used a large portion of her personal inheritance to establish the Grand Mountain Labor Trust, a private fund designed to support any workers who had been injured or lost their livelihood upon her family's building sites over the past 10 years. She did not put her own name upon the charity, nor did she use her father's name. She named the trust after the stone arches that had started the struggle, believing that the exact place where a wrong occurred should be remembered by the world rather than hidden away. She officially resigned her position at Brooks Holdings 3 months after the meeting. The board of directors had made it clear that her temporary leave would become a permanent termination if she did not step down, so she chose to leave upon her own terms, releasing a short message that said simply, "I am not willing to keep what my father built without paying for how he built it." She spent the following several months working with a small group of designers to start a minor building consultancy that focused entirely upon local community projects, with full worker transparency and independent safety reviews written into every single contract from the first day. The new office was far smaller than anything the Brooks name had ever carried before, but she found she did not miss the glass towers at all. 4 months after the press conference, Benedict accepted a position as the senior safety consultant for a medium-sized mortal construction firm that had followed his story in the newspapers and reached out through a mutual building contact. Their offer arrived with a short, honest letter that read, "We reviewed your original notes on the stone arches. You were completely correct, and we want an architect like you upon our team." He accepted the work the following Monday. Upon a bright Saturday morning in the early spring, Diana held a small opening ceremony for the very first project completed by her new office, a small wooden community center in the valley town just 2 miles away from Pinecrest Road. Benedict had volunteered his time to review the safety layout for the building's deep stone foundation. He arrived at the site with Iris, who wore a bright yellow winter jacket, and immediately began walking around the exterior walls, checking the joints with the serious attention of a professional inspector. Diana stood with Benedict near the front wooden doors as a small crowd of local residents moved inside to see the new rooms. Iris came back from her circle around the building, stood directly in front of the two adults, and looked up at the wooden beams with her arms crossed over her chest, the exact way she had seen her father stand upon a building site 100 times before. "Is the old debt completely paid off now?" she asked, her voice serious as she looked at them. She was not asking the question to be playful. She truly wanted to know the state of their world. Benedict looked down at Diana, and Diana looked back into his eyes, a quiet understanding passing between them in the spring light. "Not entirely." Benedict answered his daughter, reaching down to touch her hair. "Some losses in this life can never be fully paid back with actions, but we are no longer carrying the weight of someone else's choices upon our shoulders." Iris thought upon his words for a moment, brought her small head to a solemn nod of satisfaction, and then turned to run inside the building to explore the main hall. Benedict and Diana walked slowly behind her into the warmth. The old stone cottage upon Pinecrest Road sat 2 miles away in the pines. The morning sun was clear across the valley, and the ground beneath their boots felt completely level as they moved forward together. The future no longer looks like a narrow path between dark stone walls, but rather like an open clearing after a long winter storm. Sitting upon the porch steps as the evening air cools, watching the wind move through the pine trees, I can see that the true value of our days is not measured by the quiet safety we build out of fear. For 6 years, I believed that protecting Iris meant keeping our world as small as possible, hiding in the shadows of this mountain, and allowing a great lie to stand because the cost of truth was simply too high for a broken family to pay. But true protection does not grow from silence, nor does it thrive in the dark corners of an untold story. It comes from the willingness to stand up upon the level ground, to look at the past without turning your eyes away, and to say the words that clear the air for the people who come after us. Diana showed me that a name is not merely something you inherit from the actions of your father. It is something you must shape with your own hands every single day through the choices you choose to make. The wealth her family gathered could not fix the stone arches, but her willingness to look at the ruin and claim the responsibility allowed us both to put the heavy pieces down at last. We did not change the past, and we did not bring back what was lost in the shadows, but we managed to build a completely honest foundation for the years that are waiting ahead of us. When Iris looks at her father now, she does not see a man hiding from his own history, but someone who stood in the light so that she could walk through the world with her head held high, and that is the only next chapter that ever truly mattered. Thus concludes this chronicle of honor reclaimed and truth spoken aloud. May it serve as a reminder that even in the longest night, the courage to stand and speak can still bring forth the dawn. If these words have touched your spirit, carry them with you and share them with those who seek light amid the shadows. There are many more tales waiting upon this porch, and each one is worthy of your time to sit and listen.